Welcome to the Bucket Plan on Demand, a podcast for financial advisors based on the best-selling book and process that simplifies financial planning. Hear from skilled industry professionals and special guests each episode that will help perfect your approach with clients and your results.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Bucket Plan on Demand. I'm your host, Dave Alison, and today I've got a special guest with us, one of our partners at C2P, also the founder and CEO of OneTeam Financial, Dave Buckwald. Dave has over 30 years of experience guiding individuals, families, and business owners through comprehensive financial planning with a focus on life insurance, estate planning, and wealth transfer strategies. His career has been deeply shaped by personal loss and the tragic events of 9/11, where he saw firsthand the life-altering impact of financial inaction. These experiences drive his mission to ensure no family or business is left unprotected. Dave is a nationally recognized speaker and educator, known for his holistic approach and passion for helping advisors and clients keep together what took a lifetime to build. Today, we're going to be talking about the cost of waiting, lessons every advisor should learn about life insurance and client inactions. And just speaking personally, I remember when Jason Smith first introduced me to Dave Buckwald. I believe Jason saw Dave speak on the main platform of MDRT. I mean, Dave, how many people were in that audience when you spoke there?
It was about 10,000 in Toronto.
No, only 10,000. So I don't think there's too many people that can say they spoke on the main platform in front of 10,000 people. And I remember, Jason introduced us through Ed Slott's Elite IRA Advisor Group, which you're one of the charter members, which is what, like the first 10 members, 20 members to join Ed Slott's Elite IRA Advisor Group?
Yes, we bought into Ed's vision very early on. Yeah, I think it was about 10 of us.
Exactly. And I remember, when Jason told me the story, I went to YouTube and I searched for you, and somebody had like a bootlegged copy of the MDRT talk that you gave. And like, I just remember sitting there watching you give this talk, bawling my eyes out. I mean, as you're well aware, I'm originally from New York, and 9/11, hit a personal chord with me because my brother was in the Trade Center when it got hit. Luckily, thank God he survived, but I know you have a lot of very different stories and outcomes from that day. So, and I know that kind of comes full circle to this whole discussion of life insurance being very important and personal to you. So, would you mind, kind of taking us back in time and sharing a little bit about, what happened and how it's impacted you and how it's related to, what you've built and what you do at OneTeam Financial now?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me, Dave. It's always an honor to join you. So, I mean, I wouldn't exactly say my lifelong passion was, to get into the life insurance industry. But, life has a lot of teaching moments. And I think, we're all obviously shaped by our experiences. I mean, I started out early on. I lost my father at an early age. He had no life insurance. He didn't do any planning. So, it was a little challenging growing up with not a lot of money, but kind of shaped, my early thoughts. And then I kind of ended up in this financial planning industry, but it was really more on the insurance side. And I was like a lot of young advisors struggling along, selling life insurance because not a lot of my friends wanted to talk about life insurance early on. And, but then we just kept, plugging away, and I started to get some bigger and bigger clients. And, as you mentioned, Cantor Fitzgerald was one of my largest clients, and I was in the North Tower twice a week, meeting with various brokers and traders. And then obviously 9/11 happened. I had never had a death claim in my career. And then all of a sudden on one day, I lost 51 friends and clients, which, spent the next year and a half, going to funerals and services and delivering death claims, and talk about, turning your life upside down, never mind losing friends and clients, but seeing up close firsthand, what it did to families that, some of them did the planning and some of them did not do the planning. But I really saw personally how life insurance really changed people's lives, replaced income for families. And since that moment, that built the vision of our new firm, really to make sure everyone has their whole financial house in orders with their beneficiary forms and their legal documents and their life insurance. So it's my passion these days. I never would have thought life insurance would be my passion, but that's really kind of what shaped everything. And that has really been my passion.
Yeah, it's such an incredible story, and I could imagine, how hard of a time period that was, and for the families that you got to meet with. I can't imagine there was a single one that thought they had too much life insurance at that point when you were delivering those death claim checks.
For sure, for sure. We always joke around. You never heard a beneficiary that denied taking the check or said it was too much. So, yeah.
Well, and I know, today we're going to talk a little bit about client inaction, and, you know better, than anyone, the difference that even 24 hours could make. Cause I remember, part of that story that you shared was, you mentioned you were in the North Tower 2 days a week. Kind of talk about that for a minute and, just the difference a day or two could make.
Oh yeah, and that's what the name of my talk, right, was 24 hours. I was supposed to be in the building the next morning. So obviously, if I would not be on this call right now because nobody really got out of that building. But yeah, you just see how in this industry, whether it's 9/11 or COVID or any of these things, that life can really just change in a minute. And nobody ever thinks it's going to happen to them. But, the older you get, you see things happen, you lose people, life can change in an instant. And, to try and get people to get their whole financial house in order, well, insurance is obviously the foundation of it. You're protecting your future earning potential. So it can change quickly, that's for sure. And I know, we all think we're immortal when we're young, but life can change quickly. And it's, getting clients to take action sometimes is the most challenging part, in the industry, is getting people to take action.
Why do you think that is? And like, you kind of, in your experience, what's really behind that kind of I'll get to it later mindset when it comes to life insurance? And, how do you think advisors can break through that barrier?
Yeah, well, I always talk, when we talk about life insurance, when you use that word, you can clear out a room pretty quickly, and you say, I sell life insurance. Well, nobody wants to talk to a life insurance person, right? And it's got this stigma. So I always say, you'd rather go to the dentist than talk to a life insurance person. So even when people do it, they usually check the box, they want to put it away, and I don't ever want to talk about it again. It's just not something people want to talk about, whether it's facing their own mortality. I can get to it later. They think it's a waste of money. It's a bad investment. I can do better with my money. Talking about brokerage accounts and investments and taxes, that's fun. Talking about insurance, most people do not want to talk about it. So I think some of the success that I've had is I usually don't mention the word life insurance. We talk a lot about taxes. Everybody wants to talk about ways to reduce taxes. So life insurance for us as an asset class, to me and to our firm, is probably one of the most powerful asset classes that you can have in the entire tax code, right? Because it is the only asset in the entire tax code that is income tax-free and estate tax-free if set up properly. So it's powerful, and there's a reason the wealthiest, most sophisticated investors in the country are putting millions and millions and millions of dollars into these strategies. So we talk about it as part of a plan, but really getting people to share what their plan is. What's your story? We ask them a lot of questions about their plan. I think people rush in to give solutions too quickly or show an illustration. And we got to be better listeners, better empathetic listeners. Ask what's important to people. and they'll tell you what's important to them. And if you can give them a better solution to help them accomplish their goals in a more efficient manner after they feel understood and heard, I think you'll have a lot of success. But taxes is usually where I start.
Absolutely. And I think there's a couple key things. The one thing I want to give, all the listeners is your little kind of golden nugget on love and greed policies, because, it brings it into perspective that people can relate to, what the tool actually accomplishes. But what you shared earlier is this is part of a bigger holistic plan. I mean, just yourself, like you do more life insurance than I think probably any advisor I know. And, I'm part of Forum 400 and, these other groups where there's some big hitters, and you do a lot of life insurance. I mean, you're a CFP, a CLU, a CHFC, a CLTC, National Social Security Advisor. I don't know, what else are you? All these other designations. But your firm at OneTeam, like you've built this ensemble firm of subject matter specialists and experts, whether it's, Ash on Social Security, Greg Dillon's a CFA. Obviously, you focus on life insurance as part of a holistic plan, whether it's, monster, huge PPLI cases for ultra wealthy, or whether it's, cases that are just for protection planning for a young executive that's got a young family and has an income and lifetime earnings to protect. And so, I want you to just share that like concept of, you talk about taxes, you talk about protecting your lifetime value, your income protection, but you phrase these policies in kind of that format of love and greed. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's one I really like. I think most people are emotional when making decisions. And believe it or not, I was a psychology major in college. And, human behavior always really fascinated me. And everyone always talks about, you heard the expression fight or flight, and you never really know which one you are until you're actually in a situation. But, I always thought about two other human emotions that, really drive people, right? One was love, right? You'll do crazy things for people you love and do almost anything to protect those people that you love. But then the other one, going back to the Wall Street days of Gordon Gekko, what's in it for me? Greed, right? What's in it for me? So I coined these terms, love and greed, right? But the problem in this industry, I believe, is most people sell products. And, again, if I had a nickel for every time somebody said to me, buy term, invest the difference, I can do better with my money, life insurance is a lousy investment, all things I've heard a million times. And I always seem a little surprised when I hear that. I'm like, really? I said, what makes you say that? And they normally, I had a bad experience, or they usually have, some story that they've heard. And I always say, really? I said, well, if that was true, what you're saying, I'm not saying it's never true, but if that was a blanket statement that permanent insurance is always bad, then why are the richest, wealthiest, most sophisticated investors in the country putting away, as we speak, millions and millions and millions of dollars into these strategies? The richest, smartest people are doing this. And also, if it was so bad, then recently, why did Congress actually put a proposal before Congress to try and shut these down? Because they're saying it's actually too good of a deal. And it's just another safe haven for rich people to put away a lot of money, never pay income taxes on the growth of the money over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and eventually, if structured properly, they can leave it to kids and grandkids and great-grandkids with no estate taxes. So I always tell them, we got to open up our minds a little bit, because there's some strategies and powerful ones out there that if you open your mind up and structure these things the right way, because that's usually where the flaw is, that we have the biggest reasons people don't get positive results of this is, one, they buy products that have high commissions, high fees, and high expenses. So they have a product that's overcharged or more fees than there should be. And then the next area is it's not efficiently designed based upon what their specific goals are. And I always say, you gave me a great line a while back that I use all the time. It's just a bizarre asset class. People, you use the rule of 3 M's, right? The most misunderstood, mismanaged, and missold product in the industry. And I could not agree with that more. But there's a reason wealthy people love it. If it's done right, explained right, because it can accomplish their goals in a far more efficient manner. So that kind of whole love and greed is, when you put a policy together, and that's usually where most people in the insurance industry just sell you a policy and they tell you, oh, you can use it for insurance, you can pull money out, you can do both. And I always say, yeah, you can do both, but it's inefficient. If you want to really figure out which one you want, if you want a love strategy, right? Because it's all about the death benefit. You want the most insurance and you want to pay the least amount of money over your lifetime, right? Because the goal is to maximize the ROI on the death benefit. Most insurance, least amount of money. But the other one, the fun one, I'll often go to someone, I won't even mention the word insurance, but I would say, so Dave, listen, I try to project in the future, if I was your financial advisor or our team was your financial advisors, and we came to you with a new investment strategy. I said, let me just kind of describe to you how it works and tell me if you like it or not. I said, here's how it works. You can put away as much money as you want. You can have anybody you want manage the money. Anybody can manage the money. You can invest as much as you want. You can access the money anytime you want. No penalties, no taxes, no 59.5, no RMD rules. You will get some asset protection, some creditor protection. Anybody can manage the money. And all the growth of this money over the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you will never, ever, ever pay income tax on the growth of that money. So if there was an investment like that out there, would you want to put a lot of money into something like that or a little bit of money? Most people will say a lot, as much as I can. And I laugh. I said, of course you would. And I said, because I basically just described the perfect investment, right? No taxes, access to my money, no rules, no limits. Anybody can manage the money. And people are like, yeah, I just want to put as much away as I can. I said, well, there's good news and there's bad news. The bad news is that perfect investment doesn't quite exist, but it's pretty darn close. And this is what all the rich people are doing. And here's the value proposition, and it's a simple one. For less than 1% fee drag over your lifetime, I can eliminate Uncle Sam from your life forever. And it's kind of the combination. We put together some nice slides and we use a lot of your slides, but if you're going to invest with your Merrill, Morgan, UBS, your brokerage guy, they do a great job for you just in a brokerage account. I always say, well, if you gross 8%, what do you really keep at the end of the day? And people, it depends what state you live in, but the ballpark is if I'm grossing 8, I'm probably keeping 5, 5.5, somewhere in that range, right? Because you got to pay taxes, income, maybe capital gains, maybe 3.8% surtax, whatever. The point is you're losing about 1/3 to 1/2, depending where you live, either annually if it's tax inefficient or when you sell, but people get the concept. I'm losing roughly 1/3 in taxes, maybe more. I said, so 8 really nets out at about 5.5. Well, if we do this other strategy that all the rich people are doing, the fee drag on that, if I gross 8, I only lose about 1% in fees. So 8 minus 1 is 7, or 8 minus 1/3 is about 5.5. So there's your arbitrage. It's about 1.5 to 2% over a client's lifetime. And that can be millions and millions of dollars, but we need to structure it the right way. And that's the greed strategy. That's the fun one.
Yep. And structure, is everything. Like I mentioned earlier, you re-quoted it, the 3 M's. It's, missold, mismanaged, and misunderstood. And, I joke, like, I think I have 8 or 9 life insurance policies on myself. And quite honestly, because they all have a different piece of my holistic wealth management plan. I have a bunch of term life insurance for protection. I have 3 little kids. Like, it's the most cost-effective way for me to ensure that if I was gone, Alana would be taken care of. We have a survivorship policy on Alana and I that will fund a trust for my 3 kids because I want to leave them something. Those are both examples of love policies, the term life insurance, the survivorship life insurance to fund the trust, right? There's also greed policies. I have whole life, plain vanilla, steady Eddie, mass mutual, dividend paying whole life insurance. I have indexed universal life insurance that gives me a little bit different market exposure than whole life does. I have VUL policies that can maybe give me higher potential upside, but they've got a different risk profile. One day, I hope I'm like you, Dave. I have enough money for PPLI. No, I'm just joking. But, there's PPLI, and that's what you're referring to in some of these situations where you could have any investment under the sun pretty much in PPLI. Now, there's some technical rules of how you need to structure it, who manages it, what you do. But the general concept of these vehicles is understanding what's most important to your client and how it fits into their plan, what they're trying to accomplish, and then not going out and buying the Swiss Army knife. Too many advisors are selling the Swiss Army knife. But if all I need is a butter knife, why would I go pay for a Swiss Army knife? I'm just going to go pay for a butter knife. And so, I think this is the benefit of you do a lot of joint work with attorneys, with CPAs, with other financial advisors. Maybe some of these people don't have the expertise, the resources, or even the desire to actively manage a life insurance portfolio like you and your team do. But I think at the end of the day, talk a little bit about how, you shared with me kind of some of those door opener conversations. But then I also know at your firm, you really always start kind of with the holistic wealth management process in the bucket plan. So are you out there kind of talking about this, creating opportunities, finding estate planning attorneys, finding CPAs, centers of influence, and then, do you try to funnel those into your advisory team that are then taking clients through the holistic wealth management process, and then you're coming in when it's time to talk about incorporating life insurance? Or tell me a little bit about just kind of how you've got that workflow set up.
Yeah, a little bit of both. So, when I'm working with attorneys, CPAs, family offices, we're an approved provider of CLE and CPE credits. So if I do a presentation on life insurance in the best interest standards or how to design it, usually I'll be brought in to, either help them with a new life insurance case or review an existing insurance portfolio to make sure it's performing well, make sure it's priced well, because a lot of policies that, in the past are either underperforming what was original projected, or they aren't designed efficiently, or they may have high charges. So oftentimes we're brought in as the life insurance specialists to really help the clients maximize the IRR on their existing portfolio. And sometimes we can save clients literally hundreds of thousands of dollars that they're being overcharged, or get a better IRR, which means either more insurance for less money or more cash value, or maybe save them money. So that's one area. And we love doing that because, those are people that already believe in insurance. We're just trying to show them a better structure, better design, or reaffirm with them, congratulations, you bought a well-priced product. Doesn't mean you always need to switch, because a lot of times, sometimes what they have is good, or it could be more efficiently. So we're kind of brought in as the specialist to help clients maximize the IRR on their existing portfolios. But, the area other times when I'm brought in or I'm introduced to someone with, creative, tax ideas, or part of a holistic plan, we like to ask a lot of questions, do a lot of listening, and then really what I really try and understand is, what are people trying to accomplish? One of my favorites, that I think can help people get in action, because even some of our own advisors, I love it when they tell me, they don't need insurance. They don't want it. They don't need it. Right. I mean, how many people have heard that one, right? They don't need it, or I don't want it. I have plenty of money. That's always a big one. And I always say that's where things start. Because I always say to Mr. or Mrs. Client, you're worth 10 million, 20 million, 50, whatever the number is. They're like, we don't need insurance. And I say, I agree, you don't. I said, but let me tell you why you may want it, and you may want a lot of it, like some of our richest, wealthiest clients. And they always kind of put their guard up. I said, just share with me kind of what your plan is, right? So let's just say it's somebody that's retiring and, their biggest balances are retirement plans, and they have some in a brokerage account. I just share with me what your plan is, when you retire. Have you done a retirement roadmap? Do you have I start asking a lot of these questions because I know they don't. When you meet with your team, your CPAs, your attorneys, your family office folks, tell them to, share with me. We ask a lot of the when you questions, but I want people to really tell me what their plan is, right? And then it really comes down to this question. I say to them, so I would say, Dave, so you don't need insurance. I agree, right? And, we get into joking around, who's going to live longer, you or your wife? And most men say, my wife's probably going to outlive me. I tell my wife, you're going to outlive me by 10 to 15 years. It's just probably the reality. So I would say to you, so Dave, right, you don't need insurance. I agree with you. I said, so your plan is, are you just going to go spend all your money? I mean, you go spend it all, right? Right, spend it all. And who cares? And if I die, I'm leaving my wife with zero, right? And most men are like, no, of course not. I said, so what's your plan? What are you going to leave her? I don't know. I said, well, let's talk about it. And how much do you want to leave her? Because I'm a big believer in, spending with, giving with warm hands instead of cold hands. I want to enjoy my money with those I love, but I can't spend it all, right? Because I got to leave my wife a little something so she'll be okay. So I try and ask people, I said, how much do you want to leave your spouse? And let's just say a couple $1 million, whatever the number may be. And I'd say, so what asset are you going to leave her? And I said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, are you going to leave her the 401k or the IRA? I mean, tell me. So I said, so, whether it's that or your brokerage account, I would say, well, Dave, so how much do you have to leave in your taxable estate for your wife to put $2 million in her pocket, right? Because it's not about what you make, it's about what you keep. And people start to think, and I'm like, and they're like, well, I don't know. And I said, well, it depends, right? It depends what asset you leave them, right? But the point of this is you need to leave them more than $2 million in your taxable estate for them to put $2 million in their pocket. Now, if it's qualified money, you might have to leave $3 million for them to net $2 million. And people are like, okay, I get that. All right. So now that's $3 million you can't touch in retirement. That's off limits because that's for your surviving spouse. But I would say, but Dave, suppose we could figure this out where I could buy a guaranteed $2 million tax-free pool of money that would only cost you about 500 grand today. So I could take 500, guarantee that's 2 million. And that would go to your family, guaranteed tax-free. Which one would you rather do? Would you rather take 500 to guarantee 2 million? Or your way, we might need 2.5 to 3 million to net 2 million. So most people decide, well, that's a better deal. I said, well, that just happens to be called life insurance. And I say the way we structure and design these things, and this is why wealthy people love it, because it accomplishes their goals in a more efficient manner, right? Because now that extra $2 million, go spend it. Go enjoy it all, right? We have the same philosophy. Go enjoy it. Protect the family with insurance, but it's guaranteed, leverage, tax-free, creditor protected, doesn't go up and down. Maybe you can do better, but it's guaranteed and it's tax-free. We kind of call that the permission slip concept. And we've sold millions and millions and millions of dollars with that concept alone because it gives people everything they want. They can spend more of their money. The government, the nursing homes, they get nothing. The family gets more money. And I always say, and Dave, if you change your mind down the road and the kids forget your birthday and the grandkids never come see you and you change your mind, I'll give you all your money back too that you put into it. If you want the 500 back, I'll give it all back to you and you can cash it in and take your 500 back. So people start to look at it like, you know what? It's not an expense. You're just repositioning assets into a different form that does more for your overall planning and allows you now to go spend all your money. So I love that concept. So when I hear people, I don't need it, I don't want it, I agree with them. but I make people, well, tell me what your plan is. And one of my other favorite ones is, when they say, I'm going to spend all my money. I said, listen, I'm cool with that. But I said, all I ask, I'm big on calling family meetings. I say, I want you to go home tonight and call a family meeting with those you love and you swore to protect. Honey, kids, dad made some decisions today. I'm going to spend all my money and I'm going to leave you guys with nothing. That's one. Or if you do want to leave them something, because that's important to you, ask them what they want. Honey, here's the kids. How's it going to go? Here's your choices. I'm going to leave you my retirement plan, right? So when you inherit it, right, the government's now going to tell you when and how to take money. You're going to have to pay tax on it when you get it, right? That's one option. Or two, I'll leave you the beach house, the shore house, so you and your brothers and sisters can figure out who's going to go up when and where, and hopefully you all get along, because I think we all know that'll be sold the day after you go. Or three, I'll give you a bucket of tax-free cash. Which one would you guys rather inherit, kids? I think we all know what they would pick, but the funny thing is, people often leave assets to the people they love most in the world. That causes them headaches and problems, not what they really want.
I love that concept and the license to spend. Just last night, I did an introductory discover meeting with a new potential client, an attorney in Texas who found me. And, he's getting ready to retire. He's probably got 6 or 7 million of liquid investable assets, plus his home and stuff. And he was kind of walking me through what he had. And he mentioned he had 3 children. And I said, tell me kind of, when you and your wife are gone, is leaving a legacy important to you? And he said, yeah. He said, we're dead set on leaving $1 million in today's dollars to each kid, $3 million. And he pulled up his, he had Empower, which was where his 401k is. And, they have all those simulation tools that says you could spend 17 grand a month, and based on your returns, you'll have $3 million left. So he pulled this up and he said, based on what Empower tells me, we can kind of spend this, which we have I would say, kind of a more frugal lifestyle. And I feel pretty confident we'll have this $3 million to leave. Plus, we want to leave 10% of whatever's left to charity also. And I said, well, that's certainly one way we can do it. And we could manage a stock, bond, mutual fund, real estate portfolio to generate you the cash flow, set up some guardrails, try to really optimize your spending to constrain it to ensure we have a final outcome of $3 million plus some money from charity. Or I can share with you a little bit different idea that you may or may not like. And I'm not prescribing this because I don't know your whole situation yet, but it's something I personally do because I have 3 kids and I want to leave each kid $1 million. But I don't want to live a frugal life with what I've built. I want me and my wife to go blow the money. And I said, so what I did is I set up a $3 million second to die life insurance policy. And because we underwrite it on both me and my wife's life, it's cheaper than one of us individually. And it's going to go into a trust for the benefit of my daughters. And that policy costs X amount a year. And that's a fixed expense that we can build into your retirement income distribution plan so that we can go spend all the rest of the money. We can give you a license to spend so you don't have to be as frugal. And he goes, oh my God, I never even knew something like that existed. He goes, I have a couple term policies that are expiring, but that's really all I've known about insurance. And I can't tell you, and Dave, you probably, have 100 more stories than I do like that of, it's not that people don't like the solution and the outcome. They just don't understand. It's misunderstood and missold. They think what I'm talking about is similar to their term policy that maybe they bought 15 years ago. And when we reframed it that way, he was like, oh, we definitely need to sit down and learn more about that. And that was just one of many pieces of this client's holistic plan of how we're going to think about how much we do in Roth conversions from 65 to 70, how we're going to delay Social Security for him, and when we're going to take it for his wife, how we're going to do qualified charitable distributions from the IRA, how we're going to do a donor advised fund now to create a deduction to do a Roth conversion. And you know what he said to me? Two things he said. He said, that solution sounds really good, but do I have to pay that premium for as long as I'm alive? And I said, well, there's different ways you could structure it. We could pay it for as long as you're alive, or we could pay it all up front, or we could pay it over installment payments, like 5 or 10 years. And he goes, well, what if like 20 years from now, I have to keep making that payment, but me or my wife have like a long-term care event? And I said, well, there's a different type of insurance that's available for that. Similar life insurance strategy, but in this type of policy, we're not completely earmarking it for inheritance and legacy planning. We're actually restructuring it so that you can tap into the full death benefit if you or your wife need long-term care or home health care or an extended care event. And he goes, wow, so I can kind of ladder those two together where I can have one policy for our long-term care and then a separate policy that's maximizing the legacy and inheritance planning for our daughters. And I go, yeah. And he goes, well, we got to figure out the payment method for that. And I said, well, there's different ways we could do that. We can construct a dividend and income portfolio, with stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and ETFs, or you could create an arbitrage on the other side with an insurance company by buying an annuity for whatever that lifetime premium is on the life insurance policy. So maybe out of your 6 or 7 million, we need to take $1 million, buy a lifetime income annuity, have it pay out, and have that pay the life insurance premium. And now we have the other 6 million to go consume and spend, knowing we took care of inheritance and long-term care planning. And like, these are the just conversations. And I kept sharing with him, I don't know if this is right for you yet. This is why we need to build a holistic wealth management plan. We need to model all this out. I charged him our planning fee. We sent him the planning agreement last night. And, these are just things to get his wheels spinning that nobody's ever really talked to him about before.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I love those ideas. I love those strategies. How many times I've heard from people, it just sounds too good to be true. How come not everybody's doing this? And I said, well, a lot of the rich, smart people are doing it. You just haven't been exposed to these strategies yet, because most people they're tired of dealing with salespeople, right? I mean, there's these questions and there's no one size fits all, but there's a lot of really creative strategies that can really help clients maximize what their goals are. And, and insurance just happens to be a powerful asset class because, it's amazing tax benefits.
Exactly. I just want to kind of wrap up with one other thing, like the environment that we're in right now. Secure Act changed the game. It made life insurance, it made Roth conversions more powerful. I always talk about Roth conversions. I know you do as well. I think it's a great legacy planning and inheritance tool because the beneficiary can inherit the Roth and then defer another 10 years to have that big tax-free pot of gold at the end of 10 years. But Dave, as well as I do, when mom and dad pass away, the kids get the inheritance. And do they want to wait 10 years to go spend some money to buy the boat, to buy the second home, to pay off the college debt? No. And so I always talk to clients about the importance of life insurance in combination with Roth conversions, because life insurance gives the kids liquidity to go spend some money, which is a permission slip to defer the Roth accounts another 10 years.
Love it.
And so that's another idea. And then just yesterday, me and Ed Slott did a program together. We had over 1,000 advisors on this thing. Wow. And I brought up, and I keep this book right here, The Retirement Savings Time Bomb Ticks Louder. And Dave, I know you know this section, but on page 279 here, Ed says, to keep your estate plan intact, you probably have to replace your IRA. This is America's IRA expert saying you probably have to replace your IRA. We've already talked about using Roth IRAs as a tax-free alternative, but now it's time to look at what may be an even better idea, the life insurance replacement plan, which means replacing your IRA, a poor estate planning tool, with life insurance, an excellent estate planning asset that is now even more valuable after Secure Act. And then he goes on to talk about how he doesn't sell insurance. He's just a CPA. But again, I think it reiterates the economic and legislative environment we're in right now around estate planning. There are people with enormous IRAs, even after this market pullback we've seen this year. We're on 20, 24, 25 years of really stellar stock market returns. People have these big IRAs that they're not going to use all of that money for themselves. It's something, my estate planning attorney I work with, Ben Kelly, we always says, these clients know they have more than enough for what they're going to need throughout their retirement. So now it's time to shift those conversations to estate planning. And the IRA is the absolute worst account you could leave to a beneficiary. And so, so much of what you've said, Dave, is just spot on. I mean, I appreciate you coming on and bringing us back all the way to, your personal experience with 9/11. The thing I always get from you is like, look, illustrations don't sell. The numbers don't sell. This is an emotional based sale. Love and greed is huge in terms of concepts and storytelling. Like you opened with the story of your father, then into 9/11. You shared a story at our Mastermind Connection trip of a client you were enrolling in life insurance. And I believe you shared they had discovered that they had cancer, but it was pretty early on, right?
Yep. Exactly right. I mean, it's, that's the story. I mean, it's amazing how these stories can impact people's lives for sure.
Yep. And it all starts with getting through that barrier of I'll get to it later. And I don't know, I've seen, and Dave, I know we talk about this with advisors in your firm, advisors in our firm. Like sometimes it's not the clients procrastinating, it's advisors need to be having these conversations. If you have the conversation and the client says, absolutely no way, I don't even want to think about it, at least you did your fiduciary duty to educate them on the trade-offs and the consequences, and you armed them with the intel to make a savvy decision for themselves. But so many advisors aren't even having the conversation.
For sure. I don't know if they're just not comfortable with it, or they don't know insurance that well, or they're not comfortable with it. I guess because nobody wants to be perceived as an insurance person, and they know the stigma to it. But with my experiences, I embrace it. But I'm with you. I just always want to get on the tax conversation, and I know that's we thought all the tax cuts are going to expire at the end of the year. Maybe not. Maybe they get extended. Who knows? But I think the point of this is we all know the deficits are out of control. We know Washington has a spending problem. I don't care what side of the aisle you sit on. They all like to spend money. And sooner or later, that debt's got to be paid. So we always try and get into the conversation is whether it's next year or 5 years, where do you think taxes are going to be going in the future? Up or down? And nobody ever says they're going down. They got to go up. And like you said with Ed Slott, I mean, he's been saying this for you guys are sitting ducks for the revenue hungry Uncle Sam, who is chomping at the bit. And I said, I don't want my family's lifestyle to be determined by who's in office. Because if you're in retirement and most of your money's in retirement accounts and they decide to raise taxes, guess what? My lifestyle just went down. And I said, that's what I want to do. I want to get the government the heck out of my life as quick and as fast as possible because they got a spending problem. And if all your money's in retirement accounts, that, like you said, that is the worst asset. But most people are caught up in conventional wisdom. Postpone. Government loves people like you. Keep postponing because you're going to get clobbered. So, hey, take it now, leverage it, use it, convert to Roths. Love the donor advised fund to offset the Roth conversions. Love those strategies. Leverage, and, use those IRAs. Don't sit back and look at how pretty they are because you're a sitting duck for Uncle Sam.
Well, if you're an advisor and any of this is resonating, get out to our tax management journey. We go through a lot of this. If you're not comfortable with life insurance, reach out to Dave Buckwald. I mean, Dave comes in with advisors on joint casework all the time. 50 or 60 or 30 or 20% of something is better than nothing. And you have one of the top experts in the country who can help navigate this situation. You can go to prosperitycapitaladvisors.com. Under contact, there's advisors. Dave is listed there. Just search for his name. Also, OneTeam Financial is his firm. Again, affiliated with Prosperity Capital. You can go to oneteamfinancial.com. And Dave, as always, it was a pleasure chatting with you here.
Thanks for having me, Dave. Always a pleasure to chat with you too, my friend.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for tuning in to the Bucket Plan on Demand, brought to you by C2P, an organization whose purpose is to educate, train, grow, and support holistic financial advisors so families can achieve true prosperity. Subscribe today for the latest episodes and insights. Visit c2penterprises.com to learn how we can help support and enhance your advisory business. At the time of delivery and any subsequent publishing, information was deemed reliable but is subject to change by the time of listening or viewing. The contents of this piece include options and projections of C2P, are subject to change, and are for informational purposes only. The information provided in this presentation is not intended to be individual investment, tax, or legal advice.